In this video, I'll be showing you how to take this to-do list app and deploy it to fly.io using Docker. This to-do list app was built with React, Vite, Hono, and Bun, and it also uses a Postgres database on the backend, which is hosted with Neon. I'm not going to cover the Neon database setup in detail here because I have a different video that does that, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description. And if you're more interested in the application code and how to build this to-do list, I also have a separate video for that, which I'll put in the description. Here's a quick outline of what I'm going to cover in the video. So chapter 1, I'll give you a quick summary of the deployment plan. Chapter 2, I'll then write the code so that the Hono REST API can serve the front end. Chapter 3, I'll then create and test a production build script to build both the front and the back end code. Chapter 4, I'll then write the Dockerfile, which will containerize our production application code with all of the necessary dependencies. And then Chapter 5, I'll deploy our Docker container to fly.io and test out the to-do list app live on the internet. Finally, there's a link to the completed code in the description, and it's free to use, so copy and paste whatever you need. And if you find this content helpful, please subscribe to support the channel. Now let's jump in. To deploy a full-stack application with a React single-page app frontend and a Hono REST API backend, I'm going to bundle all of the code and dependencies into a Docker container. And during the build process, our React frontend will be compiled into a set of static HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. The Hono REST API will then be able to serve those static frontend files in addition to the JSON data endpoints. The Docker container with all of our code will then run on a virtual machine owned by fly.io. And this design can scale up because we can easily replicate more Docker containers across fly.io's virtual machines in different geographic regions in order to reach all of our users. I'm going to quickly show you how this code works locally, and then I'll show you how we can prepare this for production by serving the static front-end code. So right now, if we look at my package.json, I have a dev script that runs both the server and the client at the same time. So if I run this, what we're seeing here is that the server has started up on port 3000 and our front end has started up on port 5000. So I'm actually running two separate apps at the moment. And for development, that's great because then I could run just the server or just the front end and test them separately if I want to. But for production, all of our code is going to live inside of one Docker container. And so our Hono REST API will need to serve this front end client code to the user in order to use our website. So lucky for us though, Hono has an easy built-in function to serve static files. So if I go ahead and, wrong keyboard shortcut, go ahead and end that and jump over to my index.ts file here inside of my server. So this is my Hono server. I can go ahead and import the serve static function. From Hono bun. Then down here I can chain that function on. So .use and then the question is, we need to provide a path to tell it where it should look for these static files to serve. So if I jump over to the client directory in the package.json here, I used Vite to build this front end, and Vite comes with this build script already built in and ready to go. So if I open up my terminal and we change directory to the client and we run that build script, we can see it working here and bundling up all of our React code into this dist folder. And it looks like I have a couple of TypeScript errors that I ran into. And that's okay. I can fix those. So ignoring those TypeScript errors at the moment, if I come to this dist folder, we can see we have just a static index.html, and we have our assets, which are a bunch of JavaScript files and a CSS file. So this is our production build ready to go, and it lives here inside of our client dist. So for this serve static, I'm going to tell it to serve from the root change directory down one into the client folder and then into the dist folder. And we will serve that entire dist folder to the user. And another thing that I quickly want to do is add in some logging, because when we actually start this thing up, it's nice to see the requests that are coming in and out. It helps for debugging purposes. So Hono comes with a logger, which is really nice. And we can import that there. And then we can chain the logger on the same way we chained on that serve static. And there we are. Now, one issue I have here is that I put this as /star. So this is our root, but I have the base path /API up here. So I actually need to get rid of this and put this /API down here on my other routes. So I'm going to say /API auth and API to-dos, and then remove that base path. That way, if someone goes to just the root URL, they will then receive the front end code and they'll see the website. Now we can test this out by actually just running our server, and it should serve this static file, our production build of the front end, for us. So if I come up here, and I'll fix these TypeScript errors off screen because that's not what this video is about. So if I go ahead and clear that, and I have a script to just bun run server. Oh, I need to change directory back up to my main. That's why. Bun run server. There we go. We've started on localhost 3000. If I click that, we can see that our front end is here. So that's pretty cool. Here we are on localhost 3000, and we have our front end, and I can navigate around here, and let's see if I can make a to-do, and everything is working as expected, which is great. So then if we come back over here, we can also see our logger at work. So we can see get request to // our root, and the assets here were served to us. So we got that front end, and then we were able to make a follow-up request to our API in addition. So this is fantastic. Everything is working as expected. And then in the next chapter, we are going to create a script to make a production build of our server as well, so that we can get a nice optimized build that will be running in our Docker container. In this chapter, I'm going to write a production build script to create an optimized build of my Hono REST API. And since I'm using bun comes with this bun.build command right out of the box, which is awesome. So this gives us the ability to make a production build of our code. So if I go ahead and scroll down, they also mention why bundle, what advantages we get from this, and here reducing HTTP requests, because node modules can have hundreds of files, and so bundling will remove a lot of that unused code. Code transforms, so it'll take TypeScript and convert it into plain JavaScript, so that'll run faster. and various other reasons here. So let's jump back over the code, and I'm going to make this script. So I have my package.json file up and running. And I'll call this just build. Makes sense. And this will then be bun build. And we're going to tell it where, which folder to look at. So I want it to look at the server folder. So from our root, we could say /server, and then we need to give it the entry point file, which for us here is this index.ts where the Hono app is created. And then we need to tell it where to put the build files. So we need an out directory. And I'm going to say put this into /dist for distribution, and then we'll put it in server. And then I can also specify the target. So that is --target, and this could be bun or browser or node, and you can find those options in the documentation, but I already know what I want. I'm going to be running this on bun, so my Docker container in the next chapter will get the bun runtime and then run the production build with the bun JavaScript runtime. So that's going to be my target here. And then in addition to this, what I want to do is run the build for my client. So just to make my life easy, I want this one build script to build my my backend server and my front end client all at once. So to do that, I can say and we're basically going to do another command here, change directory into the client folder. And then when we're in there, do bun run build again. And this bun run build will, since we changed directory into client, into this package.json, it will run the Vite build. So that'll give us both our production builds all in one script. Super nice and handy. So let's go ahead and run this and see if it works. And I was in the client folder, so bun run build. All right, looking good. So we can see it did the first part and ran on our server and gave us one index.js output, and then we can see Vite build started going, and it created all these assets too. So coming up here, we can see in our client, there's our production build of the client, and then up here at the top level, dist, we can see distribution server index.js. This is our Hono REST API. And as you can see, the code looks pretty crazy after you bundle it up. But that's good. It's more optimized and it's ready for production. So now how can we test out that our build is actually working the way we want it to? So the way to do that is we can create a startup script. This would be our production start script. And we can just say bun run, and we can run this index.js file. So all we need to do is navigate to that directory, to that file, dist server index.js, save that, and then if I run the start command, bun run start, there we go. We can see we've started our server here on localhost 3000, and if I click on that, there we go. We're running on 3000. I can go to the app. Let's make another to-do. All right, that's working. I can cross off some to-dos, delete a to-do. Perfect. So our app is working as expected for the production build. So now in the next chapter, I'm going to create a Dockerfile that will bundle our production code with all of the dependencies that it needs, and so that our app can run on any virtual machine. In this chapter, I'm going to create the Dockerfile that will containerize my application so that it can be easily run on a virtual machine out on the internet. So to make a Dockerfile, we'll do that in the root of our application files here. And what I'm going to do in this Dockerfile is I'm going to have multiple stages in order to optimize the final production image. So the first stage will just be our base, and my application requires the Bun JavaScript runtime. And luckily, Bun has an official image, a Docker image, that we can use as the base. So if I say from oven Bun version 1 as my base, and then I want to set my working directory to /app. That will give us our base to work with. So then in the next stage, and stages are defined by this word from. So just by using the word from again, we go to another stage. And a stage is like a temporary image. So only the final stage will be our production image. So if I want to say from the base that we just created, I will call this one build. And this is where we're going to build our production app. And to build our production app is what we were just doing in the previous chapter, is running this production build script. So that's what we want to do here. And in order to do that, we need to copy over our package.json files and copy over all of the other application files in here and install dependencies, because our container doesn't have any of these dependencies existing inside of it. And when I say dependencies, I mean these dependencies, so Hono, Neon, Betteroth, etc. So if what I want to do is copy over the package.json and my bun lock, copy these files over so we can see that the bun lock b and package.json, and copy them over to /, which is the working directory, and we set the working directory to /app up here. So we've copied those files over to our app directory. And then we also need to install dependencies for our client. Our client has a package.json. This is our React app, and it has TanStack as a dependency and Daisy, etc. So we need this copied over into our container as well. So I can go into the client package.json and then the client and grab that same bun lock and copy those over into a client directory. So we're still in the working directory /app, and we're copying that over to /app/client. Now we can install the dependencies from our package.json files by running bun install. So this bun install runs in the /app working directory. So then we need to also install the client. So we need to change directory to client, and that /client is where these live. So then we can run bun install again. And then we can set our working directory back to the main level app. And now that we have all of our dependencies, so We still don't have our application code. So the rest of that, and then the client application code. So to get all of that over, we can copy the entire project. And that's what this does here. Copy everything from our root folder into our working directory /app. And then we can, now that we have our application code and we have our dependencies, we can run our build script, bun run build. And that is from our package JSON, the build script we did in the last chapter. So we're now running this inside of our Docker container. And this will result in our production build. But we have a lot of duplicate code in this stage here, in this temporary image, because it will look a lot like the structure that we have here. We have our application code, but then we also have the production build. So we have duplicate code. We don't actually need the application code anymore now that we have the production build. So we can create our final stage. Call it the release stage. Set the working directory to /app. And then copy over from our build stage the production build that we created. So in app dist, we'll copy that over to dist in this final stage. And then we can copy over the client build as well. Copy that over to our client distribution folder. And then we can copy our package.json and bunlock over to our app directory. And then we can install just the production dependencies that we need. So bun install production. So this will ignore any dev dependencies. So you can see here in the package JSON, we have all these dev dependencies. We don't need those for production. That was just to help us build the app locally. So we are ignoring them by adding this production flag. So now here in this final stage, we've created a very lean final image of our app where we just have the production build and the production dependencies, and we have the bun runtime. So now we can expose our port 3000 because that's where our server is running from. That way, the virtual machine that the Docker image will run on will be able to access that port 3000, and then we'll be able to access it from the internet. Otherwise, the port 3000 would be inside of the Docker container. So then the final thing we do is a running command. So we can do bun run start, and you'll also recognize this from the last chapter, bun run start. If I come over to the package, that is this script right here, bun run start. So it'll run our production index.js, which starts up the whole application. So that'll do it for our Dockerfile. We now have a multi-stage optimized Dockerfile image, and it will run our app on any virtual machine. So before I actually run this Dockerfile to create the image and container, there's one thing that I need to do. So if we take a look at this line of code, we are copying everything in our repo here over to the Docker image. And that's actually not quite what we want, because if you take a look here, we have node modules and we have our dist folder, And we don't need to copy those over because we go ahead and do a fresh install of the dependencies, and we do a fresh build here when creating the Docker container. So we don't need to bring these in, and that's just going to slow down the process of creating the Docker image. So what we can do is we can add a dockerignore file. And then in here, I'm just going to have Gemini go ahead and create this for me because it's a pretty simple file. And we'll see what it gave us. So ignoring git .env file, that's good. Ignore any .vs code, that's good. Node modules, so there's one there. I also want to make sure we're ignoring the node modules inside of the client directory. So we can say client node modules and actually leave off the / the beginning, and then the client dist as well. And then our main dist and build. So there's no build folder here, so we'll get rid of that. But otherwise, that's looking pretty good. Scripts seed the local database. We don't need that either. And we don't need the Docker compose file. That's just for local development as well. And that should do it for us. So especially the key things is you want to make sure you're ignoring the node modules because those are the biggest folders with a lot going on in there. And that will definitely slow down the creation of your Docker image. So now that we have the Docker file and the dockerignore file, now we can go ahead and build the Docker image and run it and see if everything works for us. So here in the package JSON, I'll create a script so that I have something reusable, and I'll call this Docker build. And this script is pretty simple, so it's just Docker build, and then we do a -t for tag, so that basically we get to name it. And this is a to-do list, so Hono to-do list app is good enough, and then end it with a dot, and the dot is our root directory, so that's basically the entire project we have there. And then I'm going to need another script to run the Docker image that we just built. So we'll call that one Docker run. And this one's going to be a little bit more complex. So we're going to say Docker run, and then we want to port forward. So we'll do -p to port forward. So our application is running on port 3000 inside of the container. And then we want to expose it to 3000 on our local machine. So that way, when we run this Docker container here on my computer, I can actually test it in the browser. And the other thing that I'm going to need here is we have these environment variables that the application needs. So when we fire up this Docker container, I need to provide it this env file so that it has everything that it needs to run the app. And so we can do that by just specifying .env file, and .env is what I have there. And then one other thing I need to do is this is pointing to my local database. Well, this database is running inside of a Docker container as well. So here I have it, and it's exposed to port 5432. The thing is, when I fire up this new container, it's going to be looking for port 5432 inside of its own container. So I need to tell it, hey, you actually need to look for port 5432 on the local machine outside of the container. So to do that, I can specify a different one-time environment variable, and we'll call it the database URL because that's what we have here, database URL. And then we're going to set this to PostgreSQL, and we'll use the same user and password because it is still the same database, but we're just telling it to look at our host.docker.internal 5432, and then the name of the database, to-dos. So with this connection string, you can see the database name is the same, user and password is the same as what we have here. So it's connecting to the same database, but just telling it, hey, you got to look at the host outside of the Docker container in order to find that. And then the last thing that we specify here is the name of the image we want to run, which we just tag, or we're going to tag it when this runs, Hono to do app. So Hono to do dash app. Alrighty. So now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and run the Docker build. All right, the build was successful. And if we come check out the logs, we can see these are the steps from inside of our Docker file. So we change to the working directory, we copy over the package JSON, we do the bun install, then down here the bun run production build. So these are all of the steps that we specified in the Docker file that everything worked out. So that's great. And then I have the Docker VS Code extension. So clicking on that there, I can see now my Hono to do app images. And so I just have the latest one here. And now I can run this image using the script we just created. So bun run docker build. Bun run docker run. And all right, so then over here in the containers, we can see, so I have my Postgres database running, and then I have the Hono to do app now running. And we get the bun run dist server index.js, which is our production build, which is great. That's what we're looking for. And it says it's serving on port 3000. So let's jump over to our browser and see if this thing is actually running. Hey, there we go. So then I can jump over to my to-dos and I can see my data is the same because it's the same database that I was running in the in this Postgres container. And let's just make sure everything works. And there we go. Cool. Can complete, uncomplete, delete things. The app is working as expected. So now our next step, now that we have a Docker image that we can deploy anywhere, is to deploy this to fly.io on one of their virtual machines. So in this chapter, I'm now going to deploy my Hono to-do list app to fly.io now that I have a working Docker file. So here I'm on the fly.io dashboard and I can click launch an app and it'll allow me to select a GitHub repository. And I had previously configured this to only give it access to specific repositories. So I need to jump in here and give it access to my new repository. So let's go ahead, select repo. And that's the one I want. And there's the save button I'm looking for. Let's refresh. There we go. All right, so here is the repository I want to deploy. And that will do just fine. Personal. Let's see what our advanced options are. And no, that's all right. We'll click deploy. So the deploy failed, and I'm not sure why, so I'm going to check out the logs like it recommends and see if I can figure out what's going on. So I let this sit for a couple minutes and the logs never appeared, which is a bummer. But what I'm going to do is I know that I need to add environment variables for my application. So that could be the issue that caused this to crash right away. So I'm going to go ahead and just add in these secrets and then I'm going to redeploy it and hopefully that works out. So jumping over to the .env, I'll go here one at a time. Need this database URL, new secret. And then my database is set up with Neon. And I'm not going to go over how to set this up because I have a different video for that. And I'll put a link to that video in the description. So I'm just going to copy that connection string and set that up here, set secret. And then we're going to need a better auth secret. So 123 is not going to cut it for a production environment. So going to run this in the terminal and it will make a secret for me. All right, there we go. And then I don't actually need to add in the better auth URL or the client URL because these were just for local development when my front-end client was running on port 5000 and my server was running on port 3000. I needed to specify this for local development. So in production, our server is hosting our front end, so they come from the same URL, so these two are not needed. But this one is needed. So I'm getting the warning here, the secret is staged but not deployed, run fly deploy from a terminal. I'm hoping that I can just redeploy and that will hopefully take care of it. So jump back over to deployments. And heads up, after changing repos from apps, we need to ensure they have a fly.io file, fly.toml, so press launch app to start the process again. All right, I can do that. So the build failed again, and last time I had deployed on fly.io, it had created the fly.toml file for me automatically. It created a pull request, and it didn't do that this time. So I'm going to try and go ahead and do that from scratch. So basically, it will create the fly.toml file when we run fly launch to create an app. So we need to install the fly CTL here. So if I click on this and I'm running on Windows, I can go ahead and copy that. Open up my terminal, and it says that's not recognized. And here, if you encounter the error, try this instead. So PowerShell. Okay, so it was installed successfully. That looks good. Now, come look at the docs again on the quick start. So create an account or log in with fly auth login. So let's run that. Might need to start up a new terminal after installing. No, it's still not recognized. Well, that's not helpful. Since I can't get the fly CTL to install on Windows, I could go down that rabbit hole, but I actually had a successful deployment before, so I have a fly.toml file I can copy paste. If I did not have this file to copy paste, this documentation here with the fly toml actually does go through create one by hand with the help from this reference. So I could go down and look at all these different options and fill them out, but to save myself the time, I can copy this here and then jump back over to my code, clear that out, add this fly.toml file, and change this name to and you can see I had this fly.io up here, but here I put fly-io, and that's because they change it here, deploy Hono React to fly-io, because the extra dot would cause problems with the URL. So specify that app name, and then keep all of this the same. And by default, the fly.io will look for a Dockerfile in the root, so I don't actually need to specify anything here in the build. And then our internal port is 3000, and the rest of this can stay the same. Then I can add this or push this up to my GitHub repo and try to redeploy. All right. Yeah, let me just refresh this to make sure. All right, there's my fly toml. Come back over here and see if I can launch this again. All right, this is looking better. Our build image step has actually started. All All right. Well, that one looks like it was successful. So if I just go ahead and expand this deployment process here and skim through it a little bit, um, or sorry, the build image, I wanted to show that we can see how it was going through everything. So yeah, look at that. Bun install production, it's bringing in all of our dependencies, and then here it built out the production front end, the client. So yep, it ran bun run build. So these are the steps we specified in our Docker file. So we can see it was run exactly as we wanted it to, and then deployed. And now we can visit the app and check it out. So there we go at .fly.dev live on the internet. Here is my to-do list app. So then let's see if it actually works, and we can create a user here. All right, I was able to sign up. All right, and I can create to-dos, can complete it. Here's another one, complete and incomplete. So everything is looking good. Our app is now live on the internet. So I hit a couple speed bumps there, but hey, with a little troubleshooting, we got this thing live on the internet, and that's how coding goes. That's the life of a programmer. We're always going to have to do a little bit of troubleshooting. So I'm going to wrap up this video here. I hope you found this helpful, and happy coding and Godspeed.